Okay. Welcome to our webinar, What's Your Advocacy Language? An overview of types of advocacy and making a plan. This is brought to you from the Kansas Disability Caucus and sponsored by the Resource Center for Independent Living, Independent Living Resource Center, Beyond Barriers, and Skill Resource Center. I'm Laura Denny, and I'm a member of the Kansas Disability Caucus Board, and I will be your host for today. We have Kelsey, who's our board secretary, that is with us today to be our tech person and help with any questions and answer portion of this webinar. Today's speaker is Amy Campbell. Amy is a lifelong Kansan and self-employed contractor offering bipartisan government relations services and consulting. Amy provides lobbying, association management, procurement, and regulatory services. Current clients include, but are not limited to, the Kansas Mental Health Coalition from 1998 to the present, and also the Kansas Association for Centers for Independent Living since 2022 to the present, where she has achieved overall program expansion and improvement that includes 2 grant increases in the last 2 years. So we have our slides up, and we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. For the accessibility features, today's call is being live captioned by Jane Piles, and you can turn on the captioning by clicking the CC button on the Zoom toolbar, and it should have a tab called Caption Settings. And then we also have sign language interpreters on the webinar. We have spotlighted them for you. We are using gallery view on Zoom to see the presentation, speaker, and interpreter. If you only see the presentation or one video, go to the top of your Zoom window and move your cursor on the green bar at the top that reads View Options. And then click on that arrow and make sure that you are on slide by slide gallery. Just a moment, I'll try to get it to go to the next slide. There we go. For the question and answer facilitation, to ask a question, please use the Q&A button in the Zoom. If the Q&A box is not accessible to you, you can click on raise hand. If you're joining by telephone, please press the *9 to raise your hand. When it's time for questions, we'll call on you and unmute you so that you can ask your question. Do not use the chat feature to ask questions to presenters. Questions will be answered in the order they come in, and we'll get through as many questions as possible. Okay, and now I'll turn it over to Amy.
Wonderful. So I'm Amy Campbell. I'm very happy to be here. I have been working in lobbying for more than 25 years. I stopped counting at 25 because it was just making me feel old. But it has been a really interesting career, to say the least. When I first got started, I'm assuming that everybody can see that. Can you see that? Okay. When I first got started with advocacy, it was because I had graduated from college. I had a political science degree and I was planning to go to law school. And I got a job for a lobbyist who said, hey, I need somebody who understands the legislative process and wants to work on advocacy and do some association management, but I don't need another lawyer in the office. So are you willing to give this a go for a few years? And again, that was more than 25 years ago. And here I am. I can tell you that I don't think many people graduate from high school and think, hey, I really want to be a lobbyist, unless maybe they have a really cool uncle or a relative that lobbies. I didn't know anybody that lobbied. In fact, when my high school counselor suggested, the test that you take to look at what careers you might look at, and he suggested working in governmental affairs, I thought he was just nuts. Like, who would want to do that? That's just the most boring thing I could ever imagine. But actually, it's been really rewarding. And I will tell you that one of the really great things about doing the work that I do is the people that I get to meet and work with, and the fact that it's not the same job every day. So hint number one, if you joined this webinar and thought I could give you an A, B, C, D on advocacy that's going to answer all questions and solve all problems, you might be disappointed. But I hope that by talking about a number of ways to approach advocacy with all of you, that I can be helpful in giving you some tips to be effective. We've already talked about my background, so I'm going to skip over that. So this webinar is the first of several. And this series in the future will talk in more depth about legislative testimony and written communication, face-to-face meetings and social media. So I won't get into those items very specifically, but I hope you have those dates on your calendar as well.
Amy, sorry. I just wanted to ask if you were trying to share a PowerPoint or if you had one.
Oh, can you not see it?
No.
Oh yeah, I'm sitting here going through slides. Okay, so let's figure this out. Let's see why. Why is that not? Oh, goodness.
You should be able to hit the share button. It's highlighted in green.
Well, I don't have, yeah, that's what I did before, but apparently it didn't pick it up. So let's try it again.
Okay.
Here we go. I think this will do it this time.
Perfect. Yes.
Is it there now?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm glad somebody spoke up. I'd have rolled right through this whole thing, and I wondered why I wasn't able to see people's pictures. Okay, so here are the dates that are the upcoming webinars, and I hope that anybody who's on here who has an interest in being involved in this way, it has signed up for these webinars, because I really like the way that the Caucus has sort of broken them out into very specific categories. I also got to see the sneak peek of the folks that you have covering these subjects, and wow, what a great, I'm very honored to be included at all. So let's talk about just advocacy. What is an advocate? An advocate is someone who defends or maintains a cause or proposal, who supports or promotes the interests of a cause or group, and one who pleads the cause of another. I have had some experiences with the Kansas Disability Caucus, and I know that there are people in this organization that are extremely accomplished advocates, and that you have a really strong history of advocating for people with disabilities. As a verb, the word advocate is talking about supporting or arguing for a cause or a policy, to plead in favor of something, or to act as an advocate for someone or something. I think it's really important, especially in the field that we are all interested in, that we remember that advocating can take many, many different forms. It's not always a matter of public policy. It can also just be standing up for yourself or for another individual for their needs or their rights. And then advocacy is an act. It is a process of supporting that cause or proposal. The history of Nothing About Us Without Us is very tied to disability issues historically in this country. And, it goes all the way back to Great Britain in the issues of people feeling that the government was ruling them, but not representing them. And, I think that this history is something that we need to keep in mind whenever we are trying to advocate for a particular issue. Because although many of us that have been around disability issues for years and years we take this for granted, this idea that policy, regulations, programs shouldn't be developed and implemented without the voice of the people who are impacted by these programs. That does not mean that legislators or even program directors have that same history and that same understanding. So sometimes when we are advocating for issues that we care about, beginning with this motto and sharing how this is a basic principle of what we as advocates do can be very helpful to those legislators or those program directors in understanding why we are meeting with them and why we're coming to them with the issues and questions that we have. You know, on the most basic level, there are different types of advocacy. Self-advocacy is someone who is advocating to improve their own condition, trying to communicate with decision makers to assert your own interests, your needs, and your rights. Individual advocacy is advocating for the betterment of an individual. Perhaps you have a relative who is disabled and they need services, and you're interacting with the city or the county or transportation company or the insurance company in trying to help them with their issues. And systems advocacy is kind of what we're talking about, which is changing policies or laws or rules and regulations that impact how somebody is living their life. That can be targeted at the local level, it can be state, it can be national, it can be changing laws, or it can just be getting a program to be implemented differently in a way that works better. So if we're focused on systems or public policy advocacy, who are we going to be advocating to? And when we talk about needing a plan for advocacy or using strategies for advocacy, the very first step is knowing who is involved. Who are the people who can make decisions about this? Who are the people that we have to interact with in order to achieve our goals? And sometimes it's one of these. Sometimes it's multiple levels. You know, there are broad interests that could involve all of these. It could be the agency or provider. It could be the state legislature and the state governor trying to get laws changed, programs changed, overall funding changed. Right now, I am engaged in working with our congressional representatives and senators' offices on trying to advocate for the concerns that we have about changes that are happening on the federal level, including the Budget Reconciliation Act that has a lot of impacts on the Medicaid program and how those programs are going to be operating in our states after the legislature, after Congress acts on that. And, you know, we don't talk about it very much, but community level advocacy is perhaps one of the most effective levels of advocacy, because if you have a city or county that is supportive of the issues relating to folks with disabilities, you can get a lot done at the local level. It may be difficult to get funding at the local level, but sometimes it can be the kind of advocacy where you're just trying to get an additional bus stop, or you have a park that doesn't have any curb cuts. I mean, there can be all sorts of things that people can advocate for on the local level and be effective. But at the end of the day, advocacy means doing something. If you are, I know there's a million people out there who are keyboard warriors right now in the current climate that think that they're really doing something by putting a lot of posts out on social media. Well, at some level, that could be influencing public perception. It might have some influence on your family and friends as they learn how you feel about something, but that may be the most minimal level of advocacy that a person can be involved in. So if we are advocates for issues, then we are going to be doing something. There is an action that must take place. That could be that I, as an individual, am going out to try to promote a particular idea or a piece of legislation or a change that I think is very important. Or it can be a group activity. It could be something that I'm doing through the Kansas Mental Health Coalition, or maybe I'm participating with the coalition of the Alliance for a Healthy Kansas and Big Tent Coalition and the Kansas Mental Health Coalition, all together in advocating for improvement for Medicaid expansion or for something like that. So if you're on this call, if you're on this webinar, you've probably already decided that you're an advocate, that you need to be advocating, that you need to be engaged, that you need to be doing something. So now what? I really recommend that the first place to start is don't invent the wheel. Find a group that agrees with you. Find either it might be your professional organization, it might be the Disability Caucus, it might be the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, it could be the Kansas Mental Health Coalition. Being engaged in groups who are working toward common goals will multiply your efforts and provide you with regular access to ongoing information so that you know what's going on. Communities are another option. Sometimes there are neighborhood improvement associations. Maybe it's something that's going on with your local area on aging. Maybe it's something with the local VFW. Maybe you are getting involved to set up a booth at the county fair and at the back to school festival, just to increase awareness of something. Key to advocacy is paying attention. And that may be something that we would all take for granted, but I am often involved in meetings or conversations with people who are very gung-ho about a topic, but they don't have any of the current information about that topic. I have actually, an example that I would give is that there was a young family that came to the legislature on Advocacy Day about an issue that they were very concerned about. And they met with their legislator. Their legislator had been recently elected. He was super excited to try to help them. And, then he came to me after Advocacy Day and said, why has this not happened? Why does nobody care about this? Why has nothing gone on? Well, the fact of the matter was a bill had passed on that issue 1 year before. Now, of course, their legislator didn't know because he was brand new. They didn't know because they weren't engaged with any organizations or anyone else to even ask the question. Instead, what they had done is gone straight to their legislator, which is wonderful. That's great. But if you're not paying attention and up to date on what's happening relating to those specific issues that you care about, you can end up in what is kind of an embarrassing situation where a bill had already passed on the topic that they cared about. The good news was because they had inspired this legislator to care, we were able to jump straight to implementation. And that legislator was able to reach out to the agency involved, ask for updates on how was implementation going, when might they see some actions on the ground, and rolled forward from there, and it was all great. Another level of advocacy that you might choose for yourself is just responding to calls for action. If you're involved in an organization that is advocating for something that you care about, most disability advocacy groups are tied in with some online call for action platforms. And you know what? For some folks, you got small children at home, you've got a full-time job, you're busy all the time. Responding to calls for action is a pretty great way to be involved, in the sense that all you really have to do is take the information that they're providing you and go onto the platform, enter your information, and sign on so that your representative, your congressional representative, your state senator, whoever that may be, finds out that you care about this issue. If you are taking on a relatively new topic and it doesn't fit into these other categories, because this is something that you've decided is an issue that needs something to happen, well, now we have to create kind of a strategy and figure out where to go from here. Very important is we need to know, when would things be happening related to this issue? Where would those be happening? And how long is this advocacy effort going to take? You need to have some sort of a sense of the commitment that you're looking at and how you're going to go ahead. One of the great ways to sort of dip your toe into this area is to sign up for advocacy events. There are multiple Advocacy Day events held by a wide variety of organizations at the Capitol every year. There have been a lot of community rallies going on. You'll often see rallies or public gatherings, forums, panels associated with anniversary dates, or things like that. And so you start going to these events that are already on the calendar that somebody else is doing all the work on. You can meet people who are likely to care about the same things that you care about and help you to get connected to see what you might need to do for the advocacy that you're interested in. You are going to be looking at some level of personal contact by engaging in events, or maybe you want to create your own event and you want people to come. You need to be aware that if you're the kind of person, that personal contact is going to be a part of this, and it's going to be key to its success. There's also usually, in this day and age, a level of social media marketing and communication that will be associated with having a successful event or participating in a successful event. This can be all the way from you sharing the scheduling information about an event so that your friends and family might also choose to participate, or maybe it's just that you are going to be posting pictures when you're there and using their hashtags so that you can broadcast that that event has gone on and share it with other people. But those are all different levels of advocacy that you might choose to participate in. But let's imagine that you have a key issue and you have decided that you care about this more than anything, and you are going to plow ahead to create change on this particular topic. How are you going to set up this advocacy plan? Well, your first resource is yourself. And it's really important to ask yourself some key questions going forward. And these are just some of the questions that you might choose to use, but I think they are pretty important, that before you ever get started, before you even start emailing people and calling people and trying to get people excited about this topic, you need to ask yourself these questions. And these are yes or no questions. I have an important story here. Yes or no? I have experience with these issues that I want to talk about. Yes or no? I am good with people. Yes or no? I am a good writer. Yes or no? And I am comfortable in crowds, and I am comfortable speaking to groups. Now, I can already see the cringing and thinking, no, maybe I'm 2 out of those 6. I am not all of those things. It's fine. It's fine. But you need to identify the strengths that you hold and then try to find other people who maybe hold these other strengths if they are not in your repertoire. I hope that makes sense, but it's going to be, let's say that I look at this. I have a very important story. I have experience with an issue that needs to change, but writing is not my greatest thing. I'm not a great speaker. And honestly, people make me a little nervous. Well, that's fine. In that situation, you're probably going to want to be reaching out to a group that is in existence that has members who have these other skills and ask them to join you in this important um, issue or this important quest. You want to know what very clearly in your own mind what your role is going to be. I think I've met too many people who run into a wall of heartbreak and discouragement because they think they have to be all of these things. And it turns out to be overwhelming, or it turns out to be something that they can't see through to the end, and then they feel like a failure in their heart on them. And there's no need for all of that. There is a role for every single person in advocacy, but you want to be brutally honest with yourself about what is your capacity to participate and where you're going to be the most comfortable. So what is this topic that you're going to be advocating for? Obviously, what do I care about? Do I care enough about this to spend the time that it's likely to take me to be engaged? What is the issue that needs to change? Since beginning working with the Kansas Mental Health Coalition, one of the first topics that I was addressing working for them was passing a mental health parity law in the state of Kansas. And so that means that I have had to learn over time a lot of nitty gritty about insurance policies, insurance regulations, insurance oversight. If you are someone who thinks that is a fascinating topic, you'd love to dive into, well, then come on over. I got a job for you, because it can be very difficult and it can take a lot of time. But you need to have some sort of basic understanding. If it's an insurance issue that I want to change, I have to know where that change is going to be effective. Maybe the change that I want is something that the law already requires, but nobody's enforcing it. And so that's why it's a problem. It's going to be important to understand what needs to change in order to reach the goal that I have. Who can change it? Is this about laws and funding, so it needs to be legislators? Is it about implementation of a program that's just being under-resourced and just not going well and not doing what it's supposed to do? So I could deal with that at an agency level or maybe a clinical level. And then how can I personally be involved? How is my involvement going to effectuate that change or actually make a difference? Is it because I can be the one who actually goes and sits down and meets with the key people and explains what we're experiencing, and therefore they might then say, oh, well, we didn't know that was happening, and so we can change it? Or is it more a situation where I need to be one of a group who is creating sort of a grassroots effort to get some attention for a problem that currently nobody seems to be paying attention to? And then finally, what impact is that advocacy going to have on my own life? Am I someone who is easily overwhelmed? Am I someone who does not have access to reliable transportation and has a difficult time getting to places to be engaged? Is this something that I am going to take on and it's going to stretch me so thin that I'm going to become frustrated? One of the clients that I work with are called specialized medical care providers. They provide nursing services in the home to families of children with severe medical needs. They call them medically fragile. So if you walked into this, just to use an example, a 4-year-old's bedroom, it would look more like a hospital room than a 4-year-old's room. That mom might be the most effective advocate for what her child needs, but her ability and her bandwidth to provide that advocacy is going to be limited, because right now, living her life, paying her bills, getting to work on time, and making sure that her child has the coverage that they need so that she can do all of those things is already overwhelming. So these are things that you need to recognize when you're entering into advocacy. And that way you can select a reasonable amount of involvement for yourself. No, I can't attend meetings on a weekly basis going back and forth with the agency on this, but I can show up to a CanCare Oversight Committee meeting in the summer, having a lobbyist like Amy Campbell help me get my testimony in so that everything's ready to go. I can testify over Zoom. I can make sure there's a nurse there to care for my child while I do that. And that is something that I have the capacity to do. So rolling forward with our strategy, one of the things I don't particularly love about webinars is I can't see your faces and I can't engage back and forth with you on the topic here. I would love to have you guys throw topics at me that we might create an advocacy effort for. But what we can do with webinar is to do some polls. So I wonder if we could go ahead and get put the polls out for the participants. So I think there's just 4 questions on there, and I'm going to let you just take a minute to go ahead and go no, 5 questions. Just go through. There's no right or wrong answers, and you're not going to be identified with your answer, but please just select one of the answers on each of these questions. And this is just kind of designed for you to take a little bit of an inventory of where you are today as an advocate. And if you're able to, say yes on all of these, then you will know that you're doing very well. So I want to advocate for change. I want to change the statute. And I'm going to do this with the Kansas legislature. I know that that's where the change has to take place, because folks at the agency have already KDADs have already told me we can't do what you're talking about, Amy, because that would require a change in the law. So I have to start with this information. What do I know? What statute needs to change, and what does that change need to look like? I, as an advocate, don't necessarily have to be the person who drafts that legislation. I can work with my legislator, and they can ask legislative staff to draft potential legislation. But I need to have enough information to know what the current statute says and what it does, and what this change is going to do. So how it kind of needs to read in order to make that happen. Well, how do I find that out? I'm going to have to talk to a lot of different people. It is never a good idea to show up in the legislature with a hearing and your bill and your personal legislator on board, but not have talked to anyone else related to this topic about whether or not you're even asking for the right things to achieve what you want to achieve. So there's preparation. What kind of preparation do I need? What do I need to get this done? Well, first of all, I need a well-drafted proposal. And that, again, is going to require input from a number of entities who are related to maybe the providers that provide that service can provide me some information about how they think that should read to actually do what I want it to do. Maybe the agency, I could run that past KDADS and say, is this, okay, this is what I've put together. Does it do what I think it does? Can it be effective? One of the things that often happens, and I mean often, is that a great idea comes forward from a group, they get their bill introduced, and then the next thing they know is that the agency who would be charged with implementing that new law comes out with a fiscal note saying it's going to cost $7 million to do what you're suggesting. That's about the quickest way to kill your bill, is to not realize what the costs might be, or what all might be involved in this particular topic. With preparation, you also need to know what's it going to take to get me to the end. Who's going to have to be okay with this for it to be able to move forward? So that kind of gets us into collaboration. So I might be collaborating with the other members of the Disability Caucus, or I might be collaborating with other members of my community, who all need the same thing that I need. And so we're all on the same team, and I've got that collaboration. So am I done? No, I need the collaboration of people who are the actual legislators who will actually be voting on this. Every piece of meaningful legislation needs a champion, and it is better if that champion actually sits in a seat in the legislature and casts a vote. Legislators have influence over one another. They have those relationships, and they can be effective for you. I also want to collaborate to the best of my ability with anyone who might not like my idea. Maybe I take my idea to the association that I know hates this idea, and I collaborate with them about creating language that we both can agree on, so that there is not opposition once it comes to the legislature. At the end of this, we have to talk about relationships. Lobbying, advocacy, this truly is about relationships. If the people you're trying to influence roll their eyes and cringe every time they see that you're the one on the phone, or try to come up with excuses not to meet with you because you're so abrasive and aggressive when you talk to them, you're not going to have a whole lot of great collaboration in getting your issue to move forward. I want to form relationships with the people and entities around my issue that have the ability to help me, and with the people who have the ability to hurt me, so that I at least have open communication with those folks. And at the end, let's talk about influence. Lobbying is always described as influence. Who's going to be motivated to act? Who's going to be motivated to stand up and oppose my thing? Or worse, who's going to be motivated to be sneaky behind the scenes and submarine my proposal without me even knowing it? There are many bills that show up at the legislature with, 5, 6 people testifying in support and nobody against it, and yet that bill goes nowhere. Why does that happen? Well, it's because people who have influence don't want the bill to pass, and they're able to exert that influence whether or not they have to do it publicly. Voters have a great deal of influence with their legislators, neighbors, constituents. You all have influence. But that influence is also going to depend on the quality of the relationship. Is it a positive relationship? Okay, don't know why it's not advancing. Let's see if I can do it down here. Here we go. So it looks like the pictures are over the words here. That's kind of a shame. Let's see. So I can move the pictures on my screen. I don't know if that's what it appears like for everybody else, but let's try it. So if what I'm advocating for requires the support and the involvement of elected officials, there is a step number one, and that is, are you a registered voter? That I mean, literally on your homework page, this is number one. So at the end of this webinar today, and I'm going to bet, just because I know this group, I'm going to bet that a large percentage of all of you are registered voters. I've put on here the link to the website, the VoterView Kansas website. And if you're a registered voter and you click on that and you put your information into the slots, it will come up and show you your voter registration, where your polling place is. And you know what else it'll show you? It'll show you whether or not you've been voting in the general and primary elections. I don't know if everyone is aware that that is public information, but not only is that visible to me when I look at my own information, it is also visible to candidates when they get their lists to go out and walk their districts. So when the local candidates are walking up and putting their flyers on your door or knocking on the door so that they can talk to you, they can see if you, number one, if you're a registered voter. Number two, if you're not a regular voter. The most influential voters are, and the ones who are typically selected for polling projects or anything like that, are what's called a primary voter. So someone who regularly votes in primaries and local elections. It's kind of like a little voter resume for you, and it shows that you're active and that you're engaged. Those are the voters that candidates covet the most. So if you're someone who says, look, I know that my elected official has fundraisers, but I can't afford to go and give him a $50 check. I mean, I have to use that money for my groceries, for God's sake. This is one way that you can make yourself a desirable constituent, is to make sure that you have a record of always participating in elections. Below that are some organizational platforms that you can use to engage on the congressional level in contacting congressmen and senators on a wide variety of issues. These are the kinds of platforms that you go into it, you enter your information in your zip code and or your address, and it'll pop up and it'll tell you who your representatives are, and it'll link you straight to them, and sometimes even have scripts or issues all laid out for you to go ahead and send to them. I'm not saying that you have to use these platforms. I'm saying that there are so many platforms out there that already exist to help you engage with federal officials that you should feel comfortable trying them out, looking at a variety of them and seeing if and using them. It doesn't hurt anything to use those platforms. You don't have to use their message. Their message could be, we hate the big, beautiful bill, and you could use their platform to write a whole thing about how you support the big, beautiful bill. But the platforms will help to connect you. Or you can just use them to get the email addresses or the addresses of those that you want to reach out to. I will say that the 5 Calls organization really recommends phone calls. And I think that's what I've been using in reaching out to the congressional representatives and the state senators. Do they all have people to answer the phone during office hours? For the most part, I have been having conversation with staffers. Now, I know that right before the reconciliation bill was voted on in the House at the end of May, that there were a lot of phones going unanswered just because they were overwhelmed. There was so many people calling. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Why is this slide here? It's to talk about our strategy in what we're doing. The timing is very important. If I am trying to advocate in general, let's say that I'm just advocating for suicide prevention and anti-stigma, then maybe Mental Health Awareness Month is a great time to do that and to talk to public officials, my city councilman, my county commissioner, about the fact that I, as a local voter, really care about mental health issues in general, and that we as a community need to be investing more resources in mental health care. If what I'm doing is trying to pass a bill in the legislature, that time frame is going to look a little bit different. I probably want to be using the summer months to be reaching out to my own representative and senator and trying to make sure that they are aware of what it is that I'm trying to get proposed and see if I can get their help. Waiting until January to get legislators to support your bill is a little bit late. The Kansas legislature has expedited its 90-day session. In 2025, the entire session was over the first week of April, which is a whole month faster than what it has traditionally been. It's still a 90-day session, but what they did was they expedited the calendar so that those 90 days, as they count them, include Saturdays and Sundays, even though they're not actually working on Saturdays and Sundays for the most part. So as a result, if I wait till January to try to get something done, I'm probably already behind the ball. Let's talk about influence. I don't know how many of you know Representative Henry Helgerson, but he's been in the Kansas legislature for a really, really, really long time. He very kindly showed up to a meeting in Wichita it was my association conference. And when he stood up during the introductions, he said, I'm really just here to try to help Amy out a little bit and share with her members something that might help her at the legislature. And that is if all of you would recognize how this works in Topeka. I think there are a lot of people that feel like the lobbyists just can go up there and just make things happen. Well, most of the issues around disability or healthcare concerns need to be sort of grassroots issues. And his point was that as an individual, a legislator is an individual. They're a neighbor. Some of them are accountants. Some of them are farmers. He's a business owner. Some of them are social workers. But every person on this earth has circles of influence in their lives. And those circles of influence are the people that they are most likely to listen to. And as you can see on there, your closest circle is typically going to be your family. The next one might be friends. And in that friends category, especially around legislators, you're going to have some lobbyists and advocates, right? People that have gotten to know that legislator over the years, who have supported them on a regular basis, who have helped them to get their message out to their constituents. Maybe you you're a constituent of a legislator. You met them when they were out campaigning in their first year and you put their sign up in your yard. And then the next election campaign came around and you hosted a backyard barbecue as a meet and greet for him to meet all of your neighbors and family. These are things that sort of move you into closer circles of influence with an individual. Can money be involved? Absolutely. If you're the top donor to that person's campaign and you're the local bank president, you're probably moving from the colleagues and clients category up into the friends category. Maybe. Depends on what your personal relationship is. But his point was, if you're all just sitting at home and waiting until the day of the legislative hearing in Topeka to shoot off an email to your representative or your senator, you are definitely on the furthest out circle here. Now, does that mean it's not worth it? I shouldn't even try? Not at all. If they get 500 emails, it's going to mean something to them. But if you are trying to be an advocate for something you really, really care about, then you're going to want to try to have as close of a relationship with that representative that you can. I'm not suggesting that you stalk them or that you are always sitting in their favorite coffee shop when they walk in. But there are different ways for you to be someone that they see in their community on a regular basis and get to a point where they recognize you and they know you by name. And that is going to move you inside these circles of influence. If there is one tip, besides being an active registered voter, that I try to give folks who want to be engaged, it is that you have to learn to be connected with these representatives and senators. You need to know who they are. If they have public forums or Q&A sessions or meet and greets, show up to them. You need to be on their newsletter email list so that you know when they're having those meet and greets and those public forums. If the first time you have a conversation with a legislator, let's just imagine, so Dr. Rivas is a new legislator from up around Atchison. He's a dentist. If the first time I meet Dr. Rivas is when I come into his office to ask him to back a program that the funding is going to cost $15 million a year, he's probably going to be very nice to me. He's probably going to be very interested in the topic and take some notes and going to want to see who else cares about this and whether or not it's something that could possibly happen. But he's not going to be so motivated as to instantly become a champion for my issue if this is the first and only time we've ever even had a conversation. So whenever you talk to legislators or representatives, you should consider that a building exercise that can go on for years. And if you're able to do that, and over a period of time, you're able to be someone that they recognize and they know, and they're happy to see you when you show up at their office, that is successful advocacy for sure. So I'm talking about how to create this influence in these relationships, but who am I trying to do it with? I know what my issue is. I've got the timing down. I know when it needs to be acted on. But what is the process that I'm going to have to use to get this thing moving? Is this something that has to go through the city council? Is it a county commission issue? Maybe it has to go to the mayor. Maybe I need to talk to all of these people in order to make sure that there is an awareness and a general support for what I'm trying to advocate. Am I the only one who is old enough to know the Saturday morning cartoon song, I'm Just a Bill on Capitol Hill? The process for legislation to pass at the state level is only slightly different than what happens at the federal level. But it's never as simple as this chart, which came from believe this came from the state's website. If I want a bill and I have talked to my legislator and he's like, yes, this is great. We need to do this. I'll help you get this bill introduced. So now we talk to people at KDADS and get some input on the language, and we now have a bill drafted. And my legislator goes into the health committee and he asks that bill to be introduced. So now I have a bill that's been introduced. Before that thing becomes law, it has to pass both chambers. Sometimes it has to pass both chambers more than once if the version gets changed. And it has to pass a committee process on at least one side, sometimes two. It's very rare nowadays that Amy's bill, let's say that Amy has a healthcare bill and it goes to the House Health Committee, passes the House Health Committee, goes to the floor of the House, passes the floor of the House. When I say floor of the House, that means it's the full chamber, the full 125 members. Then it goes over to the Senate, and then the Senate assigns it to a committee, and then that committee holds a hearing, and then that committee passes the bill, and then that bill goes to the full Senate. All 40 senators hear it. They pass it. Well, ideally, there's no amendments through that whole process. But if there are, and the Senate version looks different than the House version, it now has to be negotiated in a conference committee. Then that conference committee has to go back to both chambers. All that has to happen before it can get to the governor. Now, I haven't even begun to talk about gut and goes, where they see a bill that looks like it's moving really good. So they take the contents out of the bill and they stick something else in it entirely, but they use the fact that that bill number has already passed the House to move it ahead into the Senate process, and it starts out ahead. Well, now I have to go try to get them to take the contents that they've gutted out of there and stick that in something else that's moving so that I can make sure that my stuff still gets through. Following your legislation through every stage of the process is crucial. Again, this is why you want to be collaborating with a team or an organization or someone who is helping you track every stage of that process. But for my strategy, I need to know. I need to know where it is in the process. I need to know who it's coming to. I need to meet with the chairman in the Senate that's going to be seeing this bill, probably before the House has even passed it, so that he knows it's coming and that I'm aware if he has any issues with it. I need to know if the Senate Majority Leader is willing to put my bill on general order so it even gets a vote. That meeting needs to take place before the bill passes out of committee, ideally, so that I can make sure that it gets done, especially with the expedited session calendar that we are dealing with these days. So understanding the process is key to my strategy. I need to know where it's going next. I need to know that if we get shot sideways from a gut and go, what are my next steps to help it move forward? Now, how can I do that if my issue isn't part of a funded organization that has a full-time lobbyist? How am I going to be able to make sure that happens? Well, sometimes that's a role that your legislator can play for you. Sometimes your legislator, if they have decided to champion your issue, they will keep you updated on how things are going, where the bill is. They, or your lobbyist, or you, or maybe one of your coalition members, it lives in the district of the Senate chairman. So you can send them in there to have that meeting to make sure that they're ready, going to go ahead and schedule a hearing on your bill and get it moving on. At the end of the day, your strategy is going to rely on understanding and knowing that process. the divergence of bills, it is so much easier to kill a piece of legislation than it is to pass one. So developing your allies, developing your grassroots support, all of that stuff needs to happen well before the session. You need to give yourself time to make sure that there are people who care about what you care about. And you need to be prepared if it's a major issue to think, this probably isn't going to happen in the first year. This might be a 2-year, 3-year issue before I can get it passed. Most bills that are being considered in the legislature did not come from a constituent or trying to solve problems for disability interests. Most bills come from organized interests, associations, advocacy organizations, agencies. The legislative staff plays a very key role in keeping legislation on the track to move forward. So if my legislator says that he is the chair of the health committee and he says he wants to keep this thing moving, the research department staff, the revisor's office will be keeping him updated on where the bill is, how it's going, what it needs, and all of that to help it keep moving forward. So what does that mean to me as an advocate? It means that when I walk into the building, I am not going to be dismissive to committee secretaries. I'm not going to be testy with the committee assistant who forgot to call me and let me know that the time of the hearing changed. It's very important that you have a positive relationship with staff throughout the building because they, I've certainly seen situations where it's the staff that pops up and reminds the chair, hey, remember you were going to vote on this bill today and you forgot. Are you still going to vote on that today? And that might save the bill right there. So you want to be kind and you want to groom those positive relationships with the staff. Party leadership can be devastating on a bill. Medicaid expansion is the perfect example. For some reason, because this happened, the Affordable Care Act passed under the Obama administration. It just became Medicaid expansion just became a Republican thing. So, so you want to make sure that you are engaging with the caucus leadership, with party folks to the best of your ability to address their concerns about things if that is possible. Or you can try to fly under the radar. That happens sometimes too if your issue is not terribly high profile. Amendments are very common in the process. I know that advocates often get their feelings hurt and get upset when things are added into the bill or amendments are drafted that maybe reduce the impact or the effectiveness of what you wanted. You have to be willing to consider, is this amendment a do or die situation, or can we live with it? Because if the vice chair of the committee was only willing to support the bill with that amendment, you might want to think twice about trying to strip off that amendment on the chamber floor. Because who are you going to lose by doing that? Even if you have enough votes to take it out, are you going to now create an enemy who sits on the conference committee and will have a significant impact on whether or not your bill actually survives to the end of the process? So it's very important to be willing to and open to considering amendments, unless, of course, they completely derail the purpose of your legislation. Appropriations are key. No one is surprised to see that there were bills squeezed through the process at the very end of this session that never had the associated funding passed in the budget bill. The traditional process, we would have a mega budget bill and we would have an omnibus bill. Leadership wanted to really streamline things this year and throw everything into a budget bill and be done with it. They didn't want an omnibus bill because they feel like there are just too many things that get added to it. Well, as a result, there were a number of things, and here's a perfect example. The Office of the Inspector General was successful in getting legislation that expands their scope to be able to investigate fraud and abuse and do auditing outside and more programs than just Medicaid. They will be able to audit for TANF or for SNAP. The bill also expanded the agency. The Office of the Inspector General is under the Attorney General's office, but they don't have very many investigators. And the bill was going to I think it was going to double the number of investigators that were in the office. However, and the bill passed, but there was no funding for it in the main budget bill that went through. And because there was no omnibus bill, there was no funding passed there either. So while the Office of the Inspector General has the authority to expand right now, they don't have any money to do it with. And it remains to be seen if there will be excess funds in the Attorney General's budget or somewhere else that can be diverted over to help them out. But that's just one example of how the funding is key to whether or not legislation is going to have any impact at all, whether it passes or not. So another question is, are you passing a bill or legislation that really is not the authority of the state government at all? I think we see lots of resolutions passed at the state level that are really all about things that are under congressional purview, for instance, immigration. The state can pass a lot of things saying that law enforcement has to help with enforcing immigration laws, et cetera. But at the end of the day, the true authority for that lies at the federal level. And so a lot of what happens at the state level is just an exercise and not really going to have a huge impact on the ground. So make sure that if you're pursuing state legislation, that you're in the right place and that it is the state that controls the issue you're trying to implement. This is the federal diagram. It's more colorful, but it's a very similar process and has all of the same kinds of abilities to be set aside, to be amended, to be gutted, to be completely rewritten. There are some particulars that are different. For instance, with the Reconciliation Budget Act, once all of the different committees got their area of the budget, and then they were told they needed to cut a certain amount, or they were supposed to increase spending on military a certain amount. And it went through those committees. Then it was all combined, and then it had to go through the Rules Committee before it could go to the full House floor. So the process is a little bit different, but is somewhat similar in the sense that at the end of the day, you've got to get your Senate vote, you've got to get your House vote, and you're going to have the president endorse it. At the state level, you're going to have to get through the House, you're going to have to get through the Senate. You can skip one side or another if you're lucky enough to get it added into a conference committee report, but it's still going to have to get an approval vote in both chambers. But if it gets to the governor and she vetoes it, it's a whole new ballgame. Now you've got to ask your legislature to override the governor's veto. At the federal level, it's the same. And if at both the state and federal level, vetoes require a 2/3 vote to override that veto. So it's a winding road. It's not simple. It's not the ABCs. There's a lot that can happen. However, I'm someone who really supports the idea that passage of legislation needs to be difficult and complicated. Why is that? Because there needs to be every opportunity to get input to improve it or to change it. There needs to be multiple stops along the way where someone from the public who didn't even know this was happening can come in and say, wait, there are unintended consequences that you all are not even aware of. And that's the legislative process is designed to allow that to happen. This is a reason that I am not a fan of supermajorities in any format. I don't care if it's Democrat supermajorities. I don't care if it's Republican supermajorities. When you have an overwhelming majority and you can push things through very quickly because you're trying to get it done as soon as possible, it is very likely that mistakes are being made. It's very likely that you aren't even aware of who you might be impacting at the end of the day once you're done. And that's not good policy making overall. So there's a reason why it's hard to do. There's a reason why it's complicated. It has to touch so many decision-making bodies. You hope that by having all of that input at various levels, that you end up with a better product at the end of the day. I'm not going to be the Pollyanna that says that always happens, but I do think that we see, in mental health in particular, most of our mental health issues that ultimately pass at the end of the process have had bipartisan support. They're not just one side or another getting their way, and tend to have a lot of compromises in them that have occurred. Whether or not it can make it to that end of that process comes down to those three questions. Who wants it? Who opposes it? And how bad do they want it? And how much do they oppose it? How far are they willing to go to derail that piece of legislation or to see it across the finish line? Motivation is important. That's why when I talked about strategy, I think it's very important for you to look inside yourself as an advocate and say, how much do I care? Because you can be involved in this process as much as you want or as little as you want. And both are valuable. Maybe you're just sending that email. Maybe you're just writing that letter. Maybe the only thing you did was show up to a rally and an advocacy day where you went by and met with your legislator and told them to please support Senate Bill 5. All of those things put together are the things that create successful advocacy. So that successful advocacy can look very different at the end of the day. It may be the big goal. Maybe the big goal is that you passed legislation or you successfully got your funding increased to the level that you needed it to be able to provide the services that you need to provide. Maybe what you were just advocating for was just getting a seat at the table, getting a position added to the to a stakeholder committee or to a task force or something like that. Right now, successful advocacy would be developing more champions for disability issues. We have a lot of new legislators that have been elected in the last election that are lovely people, but they don't know anything about healthcare. They don't know anything about disability services. They find, any average person on the street is going to be completely confused by Medicaid and TANF and SNAP and we saw a number of key legislators retire and leave the legislature who were knowledgeable about Medicaid. They were knowledgeable about disability issues. And so God bless them for retiring and being tired of being a legislator. I've got to tell you, You couldn't pay me enough to do it. The fundraising, the campaigning, the session might only be 90 days, but you're being invited to go to um, every Rotary meeting, please come with me to meet with my city council member and explain to them how they're doing all of this stuff wrong. You have constituents calling because mom is having problems at the nursing home. I mean, the constituent work and all of that stuff is sort of never ending, and it's not just during office hours. So there are legislators out there who probably would be interested in learning more about disability issues. And if they learned that self-determination and living independently is not only better for people's overall health and longevity, but it's also cheaper to the state, they could develop to be excellent advocates for us. But we need to be developing champions. For me, successful advocacy is often stopping bad legislation, getting something set aside, convincing a legislator that I know it sounds good to you, but the impact is not what you think. That can be successful advocacy, is just stopping something in its tracks that would be devastating. Community advocacy is really, really important, and increasing public awareness about key issues, especially for people with disabilities, is very important. Right now, we're seeing at the congressional level, well, the administration has advocated for closing down some advocacy services, disability rights advocacy, under the agencies to cut costs. And why are they doing that? Because they look at it and they're like, this isn't services. This isn't actual healthcare. So states could just do it. Feds don't need to do it. Well, is the public at all aware about how key those organizations are to the success of people who are living independently in our communities? Probably not. So participating and engaging in things like, Mental Health Awareness Month, or, disability advocacy could be very effective in convincing people that, hey, maybe we don't need to be going after these things, that actually they have a value that we just weren't aware of. Public awareness is also very important for things like access. I have a cousin that I grew up with that has used a wheelchair of various technological abilities over the years as we grew up. But if it weren't for her, I can promise you that I would not be aware of the width of hallways and doorways, or where the curb cuts are in parking lots, or gosh, we like to go out and go, shopping and go to different stores. There are some potholes and cracks in parking lots that would destroy a wheelchair. And these are just all things that I wouldn't be aware of if I didn't spend time with her. And so I think there's many areas where just using our voice to increase public awareness is very effective. And then last but not least, I say this all the time to my Mental Health Coalition members, I'll be happy if you just meet your legislator, talk to them, and just say mental health or behavioral health over and over and over to them in your conversation, so that they remember the next time they see you, oh yeah, Lisa really cares about mental health stuff and she lives in my community. That is the beginning of developing that relationship that can be successfully effective for you in the long run for advocacy. So I hope that here's some information about the Mental Health Coalition. Obviously, I work with other organizations as well, but this does have my email address if you want to use it. Can we show the results of the poll?
One moment, I'm figuring out how to do that.
I wouldn't know how to do it automatically either. Okay.
I think, did that work?
Yes. Okay. So this is awesome. This is kind of what I thought. So if we look at this, so have you ever advocated for an issue to a public official, agency, or committee council? The major, 42% of the folks on here have done it, and they've done it more than once. I was kind of afraid of that. I was thinking, I'm going to do this to a bunch of experienced advocates, and they're going to think I could have given this presentation myself. But that's great. That makes me really happy. Um, so 27% have not. So you might think to yourself, maybe this is an opportunity. This is the day that you could make a plan that sometime in the next 12 months or in the next 30 days, you're going to give it a try to advocate an issue. Are you comfortable speaking? So 0 no's. That's incredible. That makes me so happy. So again, this is a group that's pretty experienced with advocacy, pretty good at expressing themselves and talking about disability issues. So that's amazing. I will tell you that, I speak all the time, but I certainly have days where I'm in this sometimes category. We don't always feel like we're ready to be on. Um, have you ever written down your story or experience to use for advocacy? To the 42% who say no, I might recommend there's a training module called NAMI Smarts, and the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, Kansas, leads these modules. They do some of them online, they do some in person. They typically schedule some right before mental health advocacy day in March so that people can come in and brush up their skills or learn how to do this. And one of those modules is writing your story, which is really important because if you're going to have 5 minutes with a legislator and your story is important to expressing why your issue is important, you need to have practiced it and narrowed it down to something that can be brief but effective. And that can take some practice. It's usually better to have other people involved with you to give you a little feedback and help you with that exercise. And even if you never intend to share your story, I recommend this exercise for people to really get their arms around, why do I feel so strongly about certain things? And maybe if you examine your story and your personal experience, it would answer those questions for you. Oh my gosh, everybody's a registered voter. This is incredible. What would happen if I asked you if you have voted in the majority of the primaries of the last 6 years? Would we still have 100%? That would be great. And we have only, okay, so less than 40%, 35% are not sure or don't know the name of their state senator and state representative. Okay, that's good. So the link that I gave you, that voter view link, can tell you that, or there are many platforms that you can use. If you use any of those platforms that were in this presentation for advocating, you put in your address and it'll tell you who it will tell you who your state rep is, it will tell you who your state senator is, it will tell you who your congressman is, and who your senator at the federal level is. So then you will know. Okay, let's open up to Q&A. I know that there are some experts on here, so I am an open book. I'm happy to answer questions. If you wanted to get into more detail, something more strategic, more nitty gritty, I'm open for that. Does anybody have any questions? Hopefully not everyone's asleep at this point. Oh no, are we really not going to have any questions? That's going to make me so sad. Let me go
I
ahead and
think
stop.
Erica asked, can you drop the link in the chat? Um,
Which link?
let's
Do
see.
we just want that panel?
Erica, I allowed you to speak if you want to kind of ask some follow-up. All right, and it looks like Brian had a question as well that we're seeing. Oh, I can follow up with Jerica in the chat.
Oh, hang on. I've got the links. I can put those in the chat, but go ahead.
Yeah, so it looks like Brian asked, at the federal level, how do you cope with lawmakers who either don't hold town halls or try to limit them to only their strongest supporters?
I mean, those are choices that people make. I think that there are so many opportunities for involvement and advocacy that if I find that there's one person that doesn't want to engage or don't want to be involved, that's fine. They don't have to. But I can call their office and have a conversation with their staffer. One thing that I makes me a little bit sad. Okay, so when I put that in, it said it just went to hosts and panelists. Try that again to everyone. Do I have the ability to put something in the chat for everybody, or are you going to have to do that?
I think you can change the two to everyone.
I'm not seeing that option in mine.
Okay, I'll copy and paste it and get it there.
So I see people commenting on social media groups that I called my senator and got in an argument with his young staffer that didn't know anything, and he was really rude, and all of this. And I understand the temptation to share your frustration with a staffer, but a staffer is just that. They're an employee, they're a staffer. What you want to do is use that conversation to make sure that your opinion gets communicated. And maybe all they're going to do is write down your name and information and say they oppose the bill. That's fine. That's what you want to have happen. That's better than nothing. But if you lecture the staffer about how they're doing everything wrong and how terrible it is, and all of that stuff, you're giving away an opportunity. And if you've watched any of the videos of some of these town halls where people get really aggressive and they're yelling and they're cussing and it's all of that, I get it. If I'm an elected official, I'm probably going to be pretty intimidated. I would hope that they would take their job a little more seriously than that. But what I do know for sure is that if I am insulting and rude and nasty to them, this is probably the last conversation we're ever going to have. So I might just wait and vent my frustrations with that congressman to my friends and family, but use the time if I can get a meeting in their office or with their staff, I'll use that time to express my message in the most positive way that I can. And I will also tell you that it's been my experience. Some of you may remember in Kansas, the Brownback years when there was a big sort of takeover of really conservative legislators. And school funding was the hot topic. And these poor people had just been elected and swept into office. They had been recruited by the party or by chambers. They were not experts in talking to voters or understanding school finance formulas. And so the House leadership and the Senate leadership started sending the majority leader or more knowledgeable people to these local forums with these legislators so that they could interrupt and speak for the less experienced legislators, which was probably a good plan. It still wasn't well received. And ultimately, if you'll recall, all of that was overturned. A number of those legislators were not reelected after 2 terms. And right now, it is a bipartisan effort in the legislature to fully fund education to the degree that the courts have required. So I guess when you ask the question of, how do I deal with the frustration? I look at the long game.
All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour. So just thank you so much, Amy. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today and teach us all the ins and outs about how to be a really good advocate. So we're excited to continue this webinar series. Same time, same place for next week, next Wednesday. And so we look forward to having everyone join again at that time.
That's great. And I'd love everyone's feedback. If there are other things that you would like to know, if you have more specific questions, you'd like to email me, my email's in that presentation, and I'd love to hear from you. Thanks all.
Hi. We'd like to say thank you again to our sponsors, the Resource Center for Independent Living, the Independent Living Resource Center, Beyond Barriers, and the Skilled Resource Center. And also to remember to save the date. Our next in-person Kansas Disability Caucus will be August 12th through the 14th in 2026 at the Hotel Topeka at City Center, which was formerly the Capitol Plaza Hotel in Topeka, Kansas. And our next webinar is Advocacy Strategy 1, Legislative Testimony. Thank you and make sure to advocate.